The story of the little sister. Once there was a soldier. He had a good wife and a fine son, but he wanted many more sons. One day, his wife became pregnant, and the soldier was very happy.
The baby will be a boy.
He said,
I'm sure it will be a boy.
He called his son and said to him,
Listen, my boy, a war has started in our country. I'm a soldier, and I must go and fight. I will be far away, and you will be the only man in the house. You must take care of your mother. I want a boy. I don't want a girl. If it's a girl, you must exterminate her. Then, you must come and find me and show me her blood. But if it's a boy, kill the black sheep and bring its blood to me.
The boy was unhappy.
Father,
He said,
I can't kill my own sister.
You must be a man now.
His father answered,
Remember, I only want a son.
The soldier said goodbye to his family and went away to the war. A few months later, the baby was born. It was a girl. Her brother looked at her. She was small and very sweet. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. He picked her up and held her in his arms.
Little sister,
He said quietly,
I'll never hurt you. I'll look after you, I promise.
He went outside and killed the black sheep. Then he took its blood and said to his mother,
Mother, I must go and find my father. I must tell him the news.
No,
His mother cried.
your father wanted a son. He didn't want a daughter.
Don't worry.
The boy answered.
I won't tell him the truth.
So the boy went to find his father. He traveled a long way through the valleys and over the mountains. At last he found his father.
Father, you have another son. I have killed the black sheep. Here is its blood.
His father was very happy.
This is wonderful news. Stay here with me. We'll celebrate together.
The boy looked at his father. He did not smile.
No, Father, I must go back to my mother.
The little girl grew quickly. She was a beautiful child. Her brother loved her. He made her little presents. He told her stories and sang to her. After a long time, the war ended.
Your husband is coming home.
Everyone said to the boy's mother.
It's wonderful news. Now you will be happy.
The boy was very worried. He ran to find his sister.
Our father's coming home.
He said,
When he comes, don't run up to him. Don't call him Daddy. Don't try to kiss him. Be like the other children in the village. Then he won't know that you are his daughter.
The soldier came home. Everyone ran out to greet him. Only the boy waited at the house.
Are you well, Father?
he said, but again he did not smile. That night, the boy woke his sister and went outside.
What are you doing?
She asked.
Where are you going?
Be quiet.
He said.
Our father must not hear us.
He untied his father's mule and lifted his sister onto its back. Quietly, they went away. They traveled all night and all the next day, and at last they came to a big forest.
We'll stay here.
The boy said.
Our father will never find us here.
The boy and his sister lived in the forest for many years. The little girl grew into a beautiful young woman, and the boy grew into a fine young man. Their life was difficult and dangerous. There was many ogres in the forest. The brother was brave and strong. He killed some of the ogres, but he could not kill them all. One day, a clever young ogre was walking past the house. He saw the girl, and he fell in love with her.
I want her.
He thought.
I'm going to marry her.
Every morning, he watched her house. Every morning, the young man went out to work in the fields. And every morning, the ogre waited. When the girl was alone, he went to the house.
You're so beautiful.
He said to the girl.
Marry me. I'm very rich. You will have the best clothes, and the best food, and a big, beautiful home. Come away with me now. We can be married today.
I can't marry you today.
The girl said.
First we must ask my brother.
But your brother hates ogres. He has killed many of us. He will never let me marry you.
The girl looked at him. She liked him. He was handsome and rich.
What can we do?
She said.
We must kill your brother. Then we can be happy.
I can't kill my own brother. I love you, but I can't kill my brother.
The ogre was angry.
Who do you love most, me or your brother?
I don't know. I don't know.
Every day, the ogre came, and every day he asked the same question.
Who do you love most? Me or your brother?
One day, the ogre said,
I can't wait any longer. Marry me, or I'll go away. I'll never see you again.
All right. I'll marry you.
said the girl. The ogre was very pleased.
Now we will be happy.
He said.
But how can we persuade my brother?
Asked the girl.
You must lie down on your bed, tell your brother that you're sick. Tell him that only my food can make you better. He'll come and look for me. I'll meet him and give him some of my food for you.
And after that, what will we do?
Asked the girl.
You'll see.
The ogre said. So the girl lay down on her bed. Soon her brother came home.
Sister, what's the matter?
He said.
Are you sick?
Yes, I'm very, very sick. Only one thing can make me better.
What's that? Tell me, and I'll get it for you.
I need food from the young ogre.
said the girl.
Get some for me quickly, or I'll die.
So the brother ran out to look for the young ogre. He ran fast. On the road, he met an old ogre. "Where are you going?" asked the old ogre.
My sister is sick. She wants the young ogre's food. Only that will make her better, she says.
The old ogre shook his head. "You're in terrible danger," he said. "There is magic in the food of ogres. When your sister eats the food, she will change. Believe me, I know my people."
And I know my sister.
said the young man.
She will never hurt me.
"You won't listen to me," said the old ogre. "But I'll help you. The young ogre and your sister will try to kill you. Before they kill you, you must say to them, 'Kill me if you like, but then put my body on the back of my mule, put my rifle on the mule, and send it out into the barley field.'" Then the old ogre went away, and the young man ran on. Soon he met the young ogre.
My sister is sick.
He said.
Bring me the young ogre's food, she said. Only that will cure me.
The young ogre smiled.
I'll bring her some at once,
he said. He ran fast to the brother's house and gave the girl some of his food. She ate it and she changed. Now she was ready to kill her brother. Her brother came into the house. His sister was standing up.
Sister, you're better.
Yes. The ogre's food is a wonderful medicine. I'm quite better now. I feel strong and very happy. Brother, when I was sick, I had a dream. I remembered our father's house. We used to play a game. First, I tied you to the post of the house, and then you tied me to the post of the house. Do you remember that game?
Her brother smiled.
Oh, yes, I remember that game.
Let's play it now. Tied me to the post.
So the young man tied his sister to the post of the house. They both laughed.
Untied me now, and I'll tie you.
So the young man untied his sister from the post of the house, and she tied him to it. Then she went to the door of the house and called out,
Master, he's ready. Come now and kill him.
The ogre ran into the house. He had a knife in his hand.
Stop. Wait. You're going to kill me. I know that. But promise me one thing. Take my body and put it on my mule. Put my rifle on the mule and send it out into the barley field.
All right, I promise. You'll be dead. You can't hurt us then.
So the ogre killed the young man with his knife and cut him in many places. He and the girl untied the body and put it on the young's mule. They put his rifle on the mule and they sent it out into the barley field. The old ogre was waiting in the field. He took the mule to his house and lifted the young man's body off it. He breathed on the body. Life came back into it, and the young man stood up. The old ogre gave him rifle and said, "You're alive again. I've saved your life." The young man thanked the ogre. He ran to his house. He killed the young ogre with his rifle. Then he took his sister and put her on the mule. He drove the mule back to his parents' house.
Look at your daughter.
He said to them,
I saved her life, but she killed me.
This is a terrible story. It shows us one thing: you can be good and kind to people, but they will not always be good and kind to you. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories. See you next time, my friends.
Welcome back to my channel. Hope you have a great day. Today I'm going to tell you an interesting story. The story is about Tildy's moment. Who is Tildy? Please don't leave the screen. Let me begin this interesting story right away.
Tildy's moment.
Bogle's Family Restaurant on 8th Avenue is not a famous place, but if you need a large, cheap meal, then Bogle's is the place for you. There are 12 tables in the room, 6 on each side. Bogle himself sits at the desk, by the door, and takes the money. There are also 2 waitresses and a voice. The voice comes from the kitchen. At the time of my story, one of the waitresses was called Eileen. She was tall, beautiful, and full of life. The name of the other waitress was Tildy. She was small, fat, and was not beautiful. Most of the people who came to eat at Bogle's were men, and they loved the beautiful Eileen. They were happy to wait a long time for their meals because they could look at her. Eileen knew how to hold a conversation with 12 people and work hard at the same time. And all the men wanted to take Eileen dancing or give her presents. One gave her a gold ring, and one gave her a little dog. And poor Tildy. In the busy, noisy restaurant, men's eyes did not follow Tildy. Nobody laughed and talked with her. Nobody asked her to go dancing, and nobody gave her presents. She was a good waitress, but when she stood by the tables, the men looked round her to see Eileen. But Tildy was happy to work with no thanks. She was happy to see the men with Eileen. She was happy to know that the men loved Eileen. She was Eileen's friend, but deep inside, she too wanted a man to love her. Tildy listened to all Eileen's stories. One day, Eileen came in with a black eye. A man hit her because she did not want to kiss him.
How wonderful to have a black eye. For love.
Tildy thought.
Wow.
One of the men who came to Bogle's was a young man called Mr. Cedars. He was a small, thin man, and he worked in an office. He knew that Eileen was not interested in him, so he sat at one Tildy's tables, said nothing, and ate his fish. One day when Mr. Cedars came in for his meal, he drank too much beer. He finished his fish, got up, put his arm round Tildy, kissed her loudly, and walked out of the restaurant. For a few seconds, Tildy just stood there. Then, Eileen said to her,
"Why, Tildy, you bad girl, I must watch you. I don't want to lose my men to you."
Suddenly, Tildy's world changed. She understood now that men could like her and want her as much as Eileen. She, Tildy, could have a love life too. Her eyes were bright, and her face was pink. She wanted to tell everybody her secret. When the restaurant was quiet, she went and stood by Bogle's desk.
Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today?
She said.
He put his arm round me, and he kissed me.
Really? Bogle answered. This was good for business. Next week, you'll get $1 a week more. And when, in the evening, the restaurant was busy again, Tildy put down the food on the tables and said quietly,
"Do you know what a man in the restaurant did to me today? He put his arm round me and kissed me."
Some of the men in the restaurant were surprised. Some of them said, "Well done." Men began to smile and say nice things to her. Tildy was very happy. Love was now possible in her gray life. For 2 days, Mr. Cedars did not come again. And in that time, Tildy was a different woman. She wore bright clothes, did her hair differently, and she looked taller and thinner. Now, she was a real woman, because someone loved her. She felt excited and a little afraid. What would Mr. Cedars do the next time he came in? At 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the third day, Mr. Cedars came in. There were no people at the tables, and Eileen and Tildy were working at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Cedars walked up to them. Tildy looked at him, and she could not speak. Mr. Cedars's face was very red, and he looked uncomfortable.
"Miss Tildy,"
he said,
"I want to say that I'm sorry for what I did to you a few days ago. It was a drink, you see. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm very sorry."
And Mr. Cedars left. But Tildy ran into the kitchen, and she began to cry. She could not stop crying. She was no longer beautiful. No man loved her. No man wanted her. The kiss meant nothing to Mr. Cedars. Tildy did not like him very much, but the kiss was important to her, and now there was nothing. But she still had her friend, and Eileen put her arm round Tildy. Eileen did not really understand, but she said,
"Don't be unhappy, Tildy. That little Cedars has got a face like a dead potato. A real man never says sorry."
Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories. See you next time.
Hi, my friends. Today I'll tell you an interesting story. Hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more amazing stories. Thank you.
A walk in amnesia. That morning, my wife and I said our usual goodbyes. She left her second cup of tea, and she followed me to the front door. She did this every day. She took from my coat a hair which was not there, and she told me to be careful. She always did this. I closed the door and she went back to her tea. I am a lawyer and I work very hard. My friend, Dr. Volney, told me not to work so hard.
You'll be ill.
He said,
A lot of people who work too hard get very tired and suddenly they forget who they are. They can't remember anything. It's called amnesia. You need a chance and a rest.
but I do rest. I replied, on Thursday nights, my wife and I play a game of cards, and on Sundays, she reads me her weekly letter from her mother.
That morning, when I was walking to work, I thought about Dr. Volney's words.
I was feeling very well and pleased with life. When I woke up, I was on a train and feeling very uncomfortable after a long sleep. I sat back in my seat and I tried to think. After a long time, I said to myself, I must have a name. I looked in my pockets. No letter, no papers, nothing with my name on. But I found $3,000. I must be someone, I thought. The train was crowded with men who were all very friendly. One of them came and sat next to me.
Hi. My name's R.P. Boulder. Boulder and Son from Missouri. You're going to the meeting in New York, of course. What's your name?
I had to reply to him, so I said quickly, Edward Pinkhammer from Carnopolis, Kansas. He was reading a newspaper, but every few minutes he looked up from it to talk to me. I understand from his conversation that he was a druggist, and he thought that I was a druggist too. Are all these men druggists? I asked.
Yes, they are.
He answered,
Like us, they're all going to the yearly meeting in New York.
After a time, he held out his newspaper to me.
Look at that.
He said,
Here's another of those men who run away and then say that they have forgotten who they are. A man gets tired of his business and his family, and he wants to have a good time. He goes away somewhere, and when they find him, he says that he doesn't know who he is, and that he can't remember anything.
I found $3,000 in my pocket. I took the paper and read this. Denver, June 12th, L-Win-C. Belford, an important lawyer in the town, left home 3 days ago and has not come back. Just before he left, he took out a lot of money from his bank. Nobody has seen him since that day. He is a quiet man who enjoys his work and is happily married. But Mr. Belford works very hard, and it is possible that he has amnesia. But sometimes people do forget who they are, Mr. Boulder. I said,
Oh, come on.
Mr. Boulder answered,
It's not true, you know. These men just want something more exciting in their lives. Another woman, perhaps. Something different.
We arrived in New York at about 10 o'clock at night. I took a taxi to a hotel and I wrote the name Edward Pinkhammer in the hotel book. Suddenly, I felt wild and happy. I was free. A man without a name can do anything. The young man behind the desk at the hotel looked at me a little strangely. I had no suitcase. I'm here for the druggist's meeting.
I said.
My suitcase is lost. I took out some money and gave it to him. The next day, I bought a suitcase and some clothes, and I began to live the life of Edward Pink Hammer. I didn't try to remember who or what I was. The next few days in Manhattan were wonderful. The theaters, the gardens, the music, the restaurants, the nightlife, and the beautiful girls. And during this time, I learned something very important. If you want to be happy, you must be free. Sometimes I went to quiet, expensive restaurants with soft music. Sometimes I went on the river in boats full of noisy young men and their girlfriends. And then there was Broadway with its theaters and bright lights. The next few days in Manhattan were wonderful. One afternoon, I was going back into my hotel when a fat man came and stood in front of me.
"Hello, Belford,"
he cried loudly.
"What are you doing in New York? Is Mrs. B with you?"
"I'm sorry, but you're making a mistake, sir," I said coldly. "My name is Pink Hammer. Please excuse me." The man moved away in surprise, and I walked over to the desk. Behind me, the man said something about a telephone. "Give me my bill," I said to the man behind the desk, "and bring down my suitcase in half an hour." That afternoon, I moved to a quiet little hotel on Fifth Avenue. One afternoon, in one of my favorite restaurants on Broadway, I was going to my table when somebody pulled my arm.
"Mr. Belford."
A sweet voice cried. I turned quickly and saw a woman who was sitting alone. She was about 30, and she had very beautiful eyes.
"How can you walk past me like that?"
She said.
"Didn't you know me?"
I sat down at her table. Her hair was a beautiful red, gold color. "Are you sure you know me?" I asked.
"No."
She smiled.
"I never really knew you."
"Well, my name is Edward Pinkhammer," I said. "And I'm from Kansas."
"So, you haven't brought Mrs. Belford with you, then?"
She said, and she laughed.
"You haven't changed much in 15 years. Elwin."
Her wonderful eyes looked carefully at my face.
"No,
She said quietly.
you haven't forgotten. I told you that. You could never forget."
"You haven't changed much in 15 years. Elwin."
She said. She laughed.
"Did you know that I married 6 months after you did? It was in all newspapers."
She was silent for a minute. Then she looked up at me again.
"Tell me one thing, Elwin."
She said softly.
"Since that night, 15 years ago, can you touch, smell, or look at white roses and not think of me?"
I can only say that I don't remember any of this. I said carefully, I'm very sorry. I tried to look away from her. She smiles and stood up to leave. Then she held out her hand to me, and I took it for a second.
Oh yes, you remember.
She said with a sweet, unhappy smile.
Goodbye, Elwyn Belford.
That night, I went to the theater, and when I returned to my hotel, a quiet man in dark clothes was waiting for me.
Mr. Pinkham.
He said,
Can I speak with you for a minute? There's a room here.
I followed him into a small room. A man and a woman were there. The woman was still beautiful, but her face was unhappy and tired. I liked everything about her. The man, who was about 40, came to meet me.
Belford.
He said,
I'm happy to see you again. I told you that. You were working too hard. Now you can. Come home with us. You'll soon be all right.
My name, I said, is Edward Pinkhammer? I've never seen you before in my life. The woman cried out.
Oh, Ellen, I'm your wife.
She put her arms round me, but I pushed them away.
Oh, Dr. Volney, what is the matter with him?
The woman cried.
Go to your room.
The doctor said to her,
He'll soon be well again.
The man who was a doctor turned to me and said quietly,
Listen. Your name is not Edward Pinkhammer.
I know that. I replied, but a man must have a name. Why not Pinkhammer?
Your name,
the doctor said,
is Elwyn Belford. You are one of the best lawyers in Denver. And that woman is your wife.
She's a very fine woman, I said after a minute. I love the color of her hair.
She's a very good wife.
The doctor replied,
When you left 2 weeks ago, she was very unhappy. Then, we had a telephone call from a man who saw you in a hotel here.
I think I remember him. I said, he called me Belford. Excuse me, but who are you?
I'm Bobby Volney. I've been your friend for 20 years, and your doctor for 15 years. Elwyn, try to remember.
You say you're a doctor. I said, how can I get better? Does amnesia go slowly or suddenly?
Sometimes slowly. Sometimes suddenly.
Will you help me, Dr. Volney? I asked.
Old friend.
He said,
I'll do everything possible.
Very well, and if you're my doctor, you can't tell anybody what I say.
Of course not.
Dr. Volney answered. I stood up. There were some white roses on the table. I went over to the table, picked up the roses, and threw them far out of the window. Then I sat down again. I think it will be best, Bobby, to get better suddenly. I'm a little tired of it all now. Go and bring my wife Marion in now. But, oh, doctor, I said with a happy smile, Oh, my good old friend. It was wonderful.
Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to subscribe the channel for more interesting stories.
The Christmas Presents. This was the story of two young people who were very much in love.
$1.87. That was all. Every day, when she went to the shops, she spent very little money. She bought the cheapest meat, the cheapest vegetables. And when she was tired, she still walked round and round the shops to find the cheapest food. She saved every cent possible. Delia counted the money again. There was no mistake. $1.87. That was all. And the next day was Christmas. She couldn't do anything about it. She could only sit down and cry. So she sat there in the poor room and she cried. Delia lived in this poor little room in New York with her husband, James Dillingham Young. They also had a bedroom and a kitchen and a bathroom, all poor little rooms. James Dillingham Young was lucky because he had a job, but it was not a good job. These rooms took most of his money. Delia tried to find work, but times were bad and there was no work for her. But when Mr. James Dillingham Young came home to his rooms, Mrs. James Dillingham Young called him Jim and put her arms round him, and that was good. Delia stopped crying and she washed her face. She stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat on a gray wall in the gray road. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 to buy Jim a Christmas present. Her Jim. She wants very much to buy him something really fine, something to show how much she loved him. Suddenly, Delia turned round and ran over to look in the glass on the wall. Her eyes were bright. Now, the James Dillingham Youngs had two very special things. One was Jim's gold watch. It once belonged to his father, and before that, to his grandfather. The other special thing was Delia's hair. Quickly, Delia let down her beautiful long hair. It fell down her back, and it was almost like a coat around her. Then she put her hair up again, quickly, for a second or two. She stood still and cried a little. Then she put on her old brown coat and her old brown hat, turned and left the room. She went downstairs and out into the road, and her eyes were bright. She walked along by the shops and stopped when she came to a door with Madame Eloise' hair on it. Inside there was a fat woman. She did not look like an Eloise. Quickly, Delia let down her beautiful long hair.
Will you buy my hair?
Delia asked.
I buy hair.
Madame replied.
Take your hat off then and show me your hair.
The beautiful brown hair fell down.
$20.
Madame said, and she touched the hair with her hand.
Quick, cut it off. Give me the money.
Delia said. The next 2 hours went quickly. Delia was happy because she was looking round the shops for Jim's present. At last she found it. It was a gold chain for the watch. Jim loved his watch, but it had no chain. When Delia saw this gold chain, she knew immediately that it was right for Jim. She must have it. The shop took $21 from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. When she arrived there, she looked at her very short hair in the glass.
What can I do with it?
She thought. For the next half an hour, she was very busy. Then she looked again in the glass. Her hair was now in very small curls all over her head.
Oh dear.
I look like a schoolgirl.
She said to herself,
What's Jim going to say when he sees me?
At 7 o'clock, the dinner was nearly ready, and Delia was waiting.
Oh, I hope he thinks that I'm still beautiful.
She thought.
Oh dear.
Said Delia.
What's Jim going to say when he sees me?
The door opened and Jim came in and closed it. He looked very thin and he needed a new coat. His eyes were on Delia. She could not understand the look on his face, and she was afraid. He was not angry or surprised. He just watched her with that strange look on his face. Delia ran to him.
Jim.
She cried.
Don't look at me like that. I sold my hair because I wanted to give you a present. It will soon be long again. I had to do it. Jim, say Happy Christmas, please. I have a wonderful present for you.
You've cut off your hair?
Asked Jim.
Yes, I cut it off and sold it.
Delia said.
But don't you love me anymore? Jim, I'm still me.
Jim looked around the room.
You say your hair has gone?
He said, almost stupidly.
Yes. I told you, because I love you. Shall I get the dinner now, Jim?
Suddenly, Jim put his arms round his Delia. Then, he took something from his pocket and put it on the table.
I love you, Delia.
He said.
It doesn't matter if your hair is short or long. But if you open that, you'll see why I was unhappy at first.
Excited, Delia pulled off the paper. Then she gave a little scream of happiness. But a second later, there were cries of unhappiness. Because there were the combs for her beautiful hair. When she first saw these combs in the shop window, she wanted them. They were beautiful combs, expensive combs, and now they were her combs. But she no longer had her hair. Delia picked them up and held them. Her eyes were full of love.
But my hair will soon be long again, Jim.
And then Delia remembered. She jumped up and cried.
Oh.
She ran to get Jim's beautiful present, and she held it out to him. Delia gave a little scream of happiness.
Isn't lovely, Jim? I looked everywhere for it. Now, you'll want to look at your watch 100 times a day. Give it to me. Give me your watch, Jim. Let's see it, with its new chain.
But Jim did not do this. He sat down, put his hands behind his head, and he smiled. And this was the story of two young people who were very much in love.
Please subscribe my channel for more interesting stories.